lovely to see so many faces here. Come in and join us. I wouldn't have expected to have so many people in this space to be interested into a deep dive into power structures and the food systems. But then again, it is quite a topic that impacts a lot of us. So welcome to you all here joining us for the session today. And did you all arrive safe and sound? Are you awake? Are you feeling all right?
Yes.
Great. I'm very tired myself. So whenever I just lose my train of thought, you'll just pick up. Who am I talking at you right now? But we'll get to talking with each other later. I am Aida Baghernejad. I am a journalist and a former academic who left academia as an ethnologist researching food due to, toxic power structures. Who would have expected? But in my line of work as a journalist, where I worked before and then returned to, I write a lot about culture, politics, and food. And hence, I'm invited to be here, and I took the chance to visit the beautiful Gut Boltenhof, and also I can't say no to Frida. For the next roughly hour and a half, a little bit less, more like an hour, we will first have a panel discussion for like the first half, bit more than a half of the session with two fantastic guests I'm going to introduce in a second. And then I would like to get to hear from you, from your experiences and your views on the big topic of power structures in the food industry, because there is so many aspects to it and we won't be able to have an exhaustive breakdown of power structures, but I would love to start a discussion and then continue the conversation whenever we see each other or in all our respective little bubbles. So there's that. And now I get to introduce my fantastic guest. To my left, I am so pleased to introduce Kira Huber from the Female Wine Collective in Austria. Please give a big round of applause. And Austria is already far away, but we'll also have our other guest who came from, I'm not quite sure which one of you has the furthest travel to get here, but my other guest, Lisa Dunbar from the Hospitality Workers Collective in Denmark. Welcome. And I was writing up your CVs to talk about you, but I thought it's far more interesting to have yourself talk about you. So, Lisa, I'll start with you. Mm-hmm. Who are you?
I am somebody who has sort of grown up in the restaurant industry. I'm born, raised, schooled in Denmark, and I had my first job as a dishwasher when I was 14. It didn't last long. Mm-hmm. I'm not exactly somebody you'd describe as sort of muscly, so that didn't work, but that was sort of the first experience I had with the environment and the intensity of kitchens and how important it felt. And so throughout, I'm 31 now, so throughout the past 15 years or so, on and off, I've been working primarily in Copenhagen in wine bars and cafes, restaurants with and without Michelin stars. And I think it was in my mid-20s, 25, 26, I started to become ill and to shift my understanding of the environment I was in, finding a vocabulary, and that has a lot to do with power and the abuse of it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lisa, and I'm very excited to dive deeper into this. And now I come to you, Kira. Who are you?
Hi, I'm Kira. I'm actually totally different direction. I finished school and I did like everything but gastronomy. And after a couple of years of finding myself, I actually worked in a kitchen and was like, well, I could actually try to do that for my bread and butter. and started my apprenticeship, which only took a couple of years, and I found my love for hospitality and service as well as wine, which became my passion, also for my great friends. And moved to Vienna a couple of years ago, and found my way with power and structures, with abuse myself there. But we had the great opportunity to organize and to start a female wine collective a couple of months ago. So.
And now you're here. Yes. Wonderful. Thank you so much. So for the first part of the conversation with these two wonderful people, I would like to find out where the problems are, and for the second part, try to look at solutions or ideas that could lead to solutions. But first of all, what keeps you in the food industry?
Well, a lot of people sort of ask me if I'm still a part of the industry, kind of assuming that I'm not, but I think that's also kind of the disconnect between working on the floor, working in establishments, and then being occupied with what goes on there. And so I feel I'm still very much connected and involved in the industry. And I also see that assumption is why we don't actually theorize this or talk about what is going on there, because we practice it, but maybe it's not to polish my own halo, but I see where that question is coming from. And I'm just devoted to speaking up about these things because it's so harmful to so many people, and it came from my own experience. So I can't, like, if I have to work, this is what I want to work with. To make, yeah.
How about you, Kira?
I think in hospitality and gastronomy we have that's one of the few work things you can do where you get like a direct exchange with the people who you kind of work for. So you get an immediate response, what you've done for them, and they're super happy. You can like talk to them, and it just grows as a community. And especially for me, I work in quite a small restaurant. It's like friends and family. It's people you meet through those people, and they become your lifelong friends. And as you said, you never leave it. It always like occupies you. It always like you feel something when you work. And I think that's what keeps me there and will keep me in the food industry.
Thank you, both of you, for giving us this quite emotional insight, because I personally think food is working with food, or for me, writing and thinking and researching food and food structures and food cultures is like it has a direct connection to emotions and memories and our culture, and it's how it changes. In the same vein, I thought your responses really gave a direct insight into who you are and what you think. Power structures come in all shapes and forms throughout society, and almost even more so in the food industry. We have power structures on the floor in a restaurant, asymmetries, but we also have power relations that we should and could and maybe must think about when we think about the relation between growing food and selling food and trade of food, but also between maybe animals and humans. There is so many. Soil and those who work with the soil. But let's go back to you. Do you remember the first time power structures and maybe asymmetries created a roadblock for you in your career? Or maybe you have a positive experience where power structures actually helped you. Do you want to start, Kira?
Yeah, I think I actually had both. Like when I did my apprenticeship, I worked under like a restaurant manager in sommelier, and he was like feeling himself and nothing else. And you get the idea that if people talk to you and they're like making your life a living hell and always telling you you're wrong, not explaining why, but that's wrong or that's bad. And on the other hand, they let you do their work because they're like just too lazy, or they just want to do it, or I don't know, guess they're unworth it. You get that as a roadblock because you're always like, okay, I can't ask for like more responsibility because I'm just not there, or I can just, you know, there's no way I can be who he is now or she is now, because you're just not worth it. And on the other hand, in my first like actual workplace, it was back in Graz. I worked under quite a renowned restaurant manager, and she went to Graz to like do same concept but different city, that kind of thing. And she was like the first person who ever believed in me. And when I quit, because I was just like, I mean, I was crying in there because it was like, I'm so sorry that I'm leaving and everything's so amazing. And she was like, all right, no problem, but you're going to Vienna. I'm gonna help you find a job through my connections because you can do it. I was like, no, I can't. And she was like, yeah, you're gonna do it. And that was like one of the most positive people, or actually most positive memories I've ever had.
Thank you for sharing this. Lisa, how about you?
Well, other than recognizing the things that you were saying, I think my first experience with, again, I didn't necessarily have the right vocabulary, but now looking back in hindsight, my first experience with sort of the asymmetry in position of powers, where it was gendered. It was an experience of, for instance, being harassed or sexually objectified at work by colleagues or employers or guests, and kind of, you know, still hanging on to this internalized sexism myself, but feeling in my body, this is uncomfortable and I don't want to, you know, approach that table. And then gradually understanding and having like a general societal discourse about sexism and how structural it is and how it's in everything, I also began finding my words of, okay, this is what I'm going through. But then what I met as like a double was I would talk to my employers or superiors and they would sort of brush it off and invalidate the seriousness of it or how it affected me. And that's also something I've written about in my essay that was published last year, is for me as a woman and also for other gender minorities who work in the industry, it's been so difficult to realize that sort of one part of abuse of power, the sexist, the gendered part. Of course, there is different intersections, and so that was my first encounter, and that sort of glass ceiling. Once you have a gendered sort of analytical lens, for me, it just doesn't leave you. You just see everything in terms of gender, and then you build on to different perspectives of race, ethnicity, ableism, ageism, all of these things. But my first was the gendered encounter perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, I think especially for people seen as female, read as female in the industry, it's the first lens you experience, the first time you really experience the disparities in treatment, and then class also plays into it. You already mentioned ableism and racism, which I can definitely see as a racialized woman. But let's get this on a structural level. You already started it a little bit, to take it on a structural level. How do these power structures shape and shift the field? You wrote about it in your essay, Lisa. Maybe I'll start with you.
So for me, there's many aspects that play into this. We have an institution of restaurants, specifically fine dining restaurants, which I've been focused on because we have such a high concentration of it in Copenhagen, World's Best, this and that. So the maintenance of these institutions is the brigade system, so this militant hierarchy that is perfect for fostering abuse of power, because it's one person who has complete authority, and you have one task in a production line, and as in an army, you don't have a creative, you shouldn't be creative with decisions, you just do as you're told. And so there's a problem in that construction, in that structure of restaurants. And then further connected to that, at least I think this is current in many places, but in Denmark we have no state-governed minimum wage or maximum working hours, and so it has to be negotiated between the parties of the labor market, and that is non-existent in the restaurant industry. So that makes abuse and exploitation possible, specifically for non-union workers who are extra vulnerable. And then you can pack, again, gender, ethnicity, sexuality, everything into that. And it's also such a patriarchal construction, and in that you have the gender again of it. So it's been a big task for me when people have wanted to individualize, like it's this one chef, it's this one restaurant, and I get that's like an easy way out, but from experience we just know when we let one person's doings run off with the attention, it's we forget to talk about the structural problems. Like, we cannot solve a structural problem by, talking about the few bad apples. So I get the structural conversation is hard and difficult and complex, but it's okay that it's not going to happen overnight. It takes time to discuss it. So a place like this is I hope a good place to do that.
Thank you, Kira. How do you think these structural issues come into existence, and how are they upheld? Lisa already alluded a little bit to it, but I would be interested into your perspective, especially coming from the wine side of things.
Well, there are a few people who are quite renowned, I think, especially in Austria for the wine business. You have a few people who kind of are like court face and stuff, and they're like on a pedestal, and they kind of decide where you'll go, kind of. So you have tastings, and if you ever speak up about something being shitty or being wrong or abused, you're just not invited to tastings anymore, because they're at the same restaurants mostly. And if you don't know the right people, or you kind of misbehaved in their like thought system, it's your problem, because you won't get to work anywhere again, or you have a bad reputation for speaking up, and that profits like some people. And then you come into this structure and you're like, okay, I can't speak up because then I'm in bad favor too, or hey, if I don't speak up, I will profit from that system as well, and I can go further, and I can get awards, I can meet wineries, I can go somewhere. And I think that's what's helping the system, and that's why some of us, we had this discussion actually in our like female wine collective roundtables, where you're like, yeah, but I want to go there. I know they are bad, or I know there's a person behind it that makes shitty things, but if I don't go there, I can't do like the tasting. And you're like, okay, I have to like figure my way through it. And on the same hand, you have people who are abusive, and there are people looking, and you know it, but you're like, okay, that's my vendor, that's my main vendor, and if I say something, I can't get the wines I want from my restaurant, and you're like suffering professionally again.
Which perpetuates just a never-ending circle. Lisa, from your perspective, how is this power structure upheld, and why?
It's, again, it's connected to the politics of the Danish. Again, I'm speaking from a concrete example, which is where I come from. I am very sure, and I also know that this is what happens other places. But if we sort of anchor it in Denmark and where I come from, it's a problem with politics of the Danish labor market model. It's a problem with the tourist industry and the people who lobby for that, because the fact is there's a lot of money in this as well. So the so-called recipe of the fine dining restaurants, we know Margarine, Alchemist, and it's now 32 restaurants who have Michelin stars in Copenhagen, in Denmark. 1/3 of international tourists are so-called gastro tourists, which means it's 1.5% of our yearly export. In fact, it's quite a lot of money. And then, we also need to talk about the media. There is complicity in that as well. This sort of blind, uncritical glorification of these chefs of a very similar mold, right? They're European, they're white, they're cis, they're heterosexual, and they're all friends.
Which applies to the journalists writing about it too.
Yes, and then the thing is as well that but we also see that as a general thing. Like, media is not about the social responsibility of the public service. It's become capitalized. It's about clickbait and that kind of thing. And so, for media specifically, like bigger media outlets. In Denmark, if they would go against the status quo, that would de facto be themselves sabotaging a big part or a substantial part of their what they produce. And so that's also a part of not looking closer. And when you connect all these things together, the people who are at privilege is also the same guys, the same old people who we see in positions of power in all aspects, I think, in most industries. And so they're working hard to not give up that privilege. And as we also see with the criticism that's been put forward, not just by me, but others in the past 1.5 years, there's silence. They just have the criticism out there. It has nothing to do with them, and they go on as if nothing has kind of happened. Mm-hmm. And nobody's holding them really accountable. So there you go.
I can relate to your media criticism, and I could talk about it at length, which would be an entirely different workshop then. Maybe we'll have one some other time. Mm-hmm. But to conclude maybe the first part of the talk, you already alluded to it, who benefits, but I would like to go deeper there, because there are worker shortages everywhere. I think all of you have experienced this probably in your own line of work. Worker shortages. We've had sort of maybe kind of a Me Too movement, although it's quite debatable how far it can go in Germany because of A, laws, and B, people not really wanting to go there. And as a society, collectively, you would think that theoretically we maybe be a bit more enlightened than a few decades ago. Like treating people like shit shouldn't really work anymore. That isn't really like that in reality, but So why do these power asymmetries still exist in the food industry? Let's go into the nitty-gritty. Why do people still cling to it? And not only the chefs who benefit, maybe the shining stars, but all behind under them as well. You already talked about how you are made to be complicit, even if you don't want to, but maybe we can elaborate further on that for a second.
So I think gastronomy is a line of work where relying on the knowledge of the people who were there before you. So you have people who work like 40, 50 years in the industry, and the only way to become better mostly is talking to them, working for them. And my favorite saying is, but I had to go through that too. And look where it got me. I got stronger, why can't you? Mm-hmm. And that's like the end of it. Mm. And you mostly have, especially I think in the kitchen, there's this thing, in Austria and probably all around the world when you go into fine dining. It's like, I'm going to work there for a year, then I get like a resume, I can put it in my resume because I made it through that year, because everyone knows that workplace is the worst, but you just go there because it's on your resume. And I think that's the thing, and that's what you learn in school as well, because that's how you become like a really good person, because you've seen it all and you've made it through, and you kind of like, you need to go there because everything else is just not enough.
Lisa, what we just talked about is a lot about fine dining or finer dining, but how can we take what we just talked about, the three of us, and apply it to maybe different parts of the industry, maybe mom and pop restaurants, but also other relationships and other power asymmetries? Would you say there's stuff to be learned from your experience, for example, in finer dining, to take as a lens into the other power structures and asymmetries?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Our conversation so far focused on fine dining.
Yeah.
What about the other power relations in the rest of the industry? Can these things we see in fine dining, are they also evident in other power relations?
So sometimes I've gotten shit for focusing so much on Noma and Ready Recipe. First of all, it's great. I enjoy doing so. It's great meme material. Second of all, the reason, or first of all, maybe as well, the reason why is because this is not just anybody. This is a person who had so much influence and power that people have mimicked the business construction, the way that they do people practices. If Noma does it, the world's best restaurant, and they have 20 to 30 unpaid workers at a time during, that's okay for us as well. So you kind of copy paste that, as with so many other things in your life. Like you see somebody doing really well, they're getting praised, he's being knighted, all these things, all the accolades. And so it's had a massive influence, and that also trickles down through the system. And fine dining, just to comment, I actually like now to call it upper class restaurants, because I think talking about class is important. And so what we see is that this influence, again, as I said, like trickles down, and so few restaurants, employers understand that the Danish labor market model is a crucial part of our democracy and welfare system, and so they're undermining it and kind of giving carte blanche to others to do it. So what I'm beginning to work further into, I'm moving a little bit further away from upper class restaurants to the biggest employers in Denmark, which is something called Madklubben, which is a chain of many different restaurants that are like high street, like they're affordable for the average person. They have 48 restaurants and more than 1,000 employees, and they say that they don't have a union agreement for the sake of the worker, that it's for them. And then you have McDonald's, which is actually generally unionized, and then you have these petrol station places as well, which is also a big restaurant chain. And so it's also evident there that there are a lot of people who are not working with the same rights and safety as most other labor markets in Denmark. But the thing with upper class restaurants that have been very intriguing for me, and I also wrote about, was the focus of my bachelor, was that that's where the discrepancy is, because McDonald's and Madklubben and the petrol station cafes, they're not up here saying they're saving the world or that they're socially progressive. But the upper class restaurants, they will not shut up about they're saving the environment and nature and foraging, and like Alchemist had like political comments about stuff while being owned by a billionaire. And so this discrepancy is what I find specifically interesting and like I call bullshit. And that's sort of also why I focused on that. So that was a good one, actually.
No, wonderful. Thank you so much. Let's get into the solutions part of this talk. Let's, now we've all properly been depressed during the 20 minutes, half an hour. Let's build ourselves up again. How can power structures, is there a way out? How can power structures be dismantled? I think you have had some ideas, Kira.
Yes, so actually that's one of the main reasons why we started the Female Wine Collective, because you have great people who think differently and you can support each other. So, and we actually saw that because we were starting in, I think, the beginning of March, and we started and it was like crazy from there. It just grew immensely and people were coming to us to say, thank you so much because that's what I needed, or people actually didn't think they needed, and we were all sitting together and we were like, I actually never thought I needed this, but that helped me a lot in my work, not just with wine, but with everything else. You have these great people and you can connect them, and like events like this help a lot, I think, because you get an exchange of people who want to think differently and who want to change the system, and you just feel like you're not alone in it. You get kind of a confidence out of it, and people telling you, actually, that's cool what you're doing. That helps a lot. I think, especially for women or people who get discriminated a lot, I think that helps. And that's what we're trying to do, and especially if you educate people a lot. So that's what we were also trying to do, to tell them, hey, all right, you're in your system and you don't even get what you're doing to discriminate people. You don't even see it, and I'm sorry that it has to be this way, but small twitch and you can do something different, and you make someone feel more welcome. You can like educate other people, and the cool thing about it is that if you go through do it through a positive way, and not saying you're shitty because you're doing something wrong or you're discriminating, but hey, you know, I'm sorry to tell you, but what you've learned your whole life, that's not cool. But if you want, we can like do it together. We can change your way of speaking. We're here, or I am here, and that helps a lot of people, because there are people coming to us and they're like, yeah, but what can I do differently? Because I get it, and I'm sorry that I did that my whole life. I didn't mean to, but how can we do it? And I think the solution would be like a positive and open confrontation for people.
Mm-hmm. How many people are you now within the Female Wine Collective?
Around 60.
And how are you organized?
So we mostly do our organization through a WhatsApp group for now. And we
keep it simple.
Yes, it works. We all have our phone. And we're doing a lot through like Instagram if there are new people who want to join, just because we were like, okay, there was a point where we kind of recruited people, but in the end, it's a thing that should support, and we don't want to pressure anyone to be like part of it, because I mean, you can't find, maybe it's not for you at the moment, that's all right. And then we have like our big WhatsApp group, and then we have like a smaller team of like, I think 6 people who kind of organize everything from like corporations and our monthly meetings and yeah, everything around that.
Are the meetings all in Vienna or throughout the country?
At the moment, yes. Mm. So we do have people from like Syria, which is like 2.5-3 hours away from Vienna, but it's like the easiest way for them, and also they're quite happy to be in Vienna sometimes. So yeah.
It's a wonderful city with a beautiful accent. And you founded the Hospitality Workers Collective, Lisa. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
It's brand new.
The paint is still wet.
Yes, very true. that kind of fits into your question as well, because since I sort of started this, for lack of a better word, journey last year in January, which wasn't exactly when it started, but that was when it became public, because I'd actually wanted to write that essay for 3 years. So January 2022, that came out, and I started collecting testimonies from people who'd worked in the industry, a lot of Copenhagen, a lot of Denmark, but also Austria, Brazil, Portugal, Italy, Iceland, different places. And none of it was rationalized, but I just threw myself into it, and I would sit on my phone reposting stuff 12, 13 hours a day, which I gradually understood was against my own agenda of not overworking. And so sometimes it got to me sort of the feeling of responsibility, the enormity of it. And fast forward to having learned some lessons, we need to come together. That's kind of the whole point. And the change is not going to come from the top. They're not going to transform the system. They're not going to give away their privilege. It has to be taken and fought out from the bottom up. That's also a very big class question. I think there's a big class consciousness that's kind of growing, and class literature coming back and stuff. So
everyone read Marx.
Anti-capitalist literature. So Hospitality Worker Collective is that put into action. And so it's still very new. It's about, the practical stuff about trying to get funding, about just a lot of people. It's not because they're dumb or ignorant, but workers in the industry are kept uninformed to be kept in their bad work environment and workplace. And so it's about sharing information, and it's about having discussions maybe like this. So that's like the seed that's been planted there.
Who is the Hospitality Workers Collective for?
Everyone, really. There's some employers who've also written me and asked if they could come. And to begin with, I've said it can be current or former workers in all types, cafes, bakeries, bars, restaurants, and so forth, but also allies. Because that's also the thing, yes, it has to, for me, in my opinion, my point of view, it must be a worker-oriented struggle, or not struggle, but cause, and worker problem-informed cause. But we need each other, because it's also kind of like a dual tragedy of not coming together. Because without sort of meeting, not necessarily on the middle, that is going to be difficult. I mean, it's not that we have to beg, but we can still bargain about what should be going on.
You already led me into my next question, which would be, why is it important to organize? Why is it important to dismantle the power structures? Not only for the workers themselves, but on a wider scale, for society, for the food industry as such.
Politics.
Why is it important? Because the majority is oppressed by a very, very little 1% ruling class, and it has a lot to do with capitalism. It has a lot to do with colonialism, neoliberalism. We can do a lot of the isms that are a nightmare, growing nightmare, and that is why that we have such a teeny tiny part of the population who are sitting on top of this power, and in the fact that we are the majority, that says it all. That we together must, and I know that sounds a bit abstract, we must come together, but that can be in practice talking about our work experience, talking about the conditions we work under, talking about politics, not having this shyness of conflict. Like conflict is not just yelling and getting at each other. Conflict can also be a healthy conversation about power dynamics. And so coming together, unionizing, finding the strength and the power in the majority to go against the minority power that's really making a lot of bad decisions for the world.
Well, we have this, widening disparity between those who hold power, cultural capital in different forms, and those who don't, in so many industries and in so many parts of the world and society. But yeah, to come back to you, Kira, in your slice of the food world in the wine industry, why is it important, not only for you as a worker, but maybe on a broader scale, or is it important for everyone else also to dismantle these structures?
Yes, in the end, it's like it's a way of showing more respect amongst each other, and like like raising awareness and switching something up has never hurt, actually. So you're like in the system and you're like trying to think about all these problems, and there are a few people who are like, yeah, but we could help, we have a solution, or we're trying to do something different. And that might help the whole industry as well. I mean, with the Female Wine Collective, we're like a small group of people who are doing like, you know, you have that idea of a sommelier that they're like pouring wine and they're just doing their thing. And that's an idea that we also want to break up, because just because you're a sommelier doesn't mean you don't need to polish glasses or like clean, because that's also a thing. And I think, dismantling like small things and speaking up and showing that there's more to most people who are not seen, and these people might have new ideas that maybe someone needs to, or a restaurant needs, and you're just not getting there, or the whole hospitality section needs. In Austria, we had like the thing with Corona and stuff, and there were people sitting with the government were like Hotel Sache, which is actually known for treating their employees bad. And you have a guy who's running like one of the biggest German hospitality magazines, who we all know. Yeah, you know it. And you're sitting there. Of course, nothing will happen. Of course, the industry won't get better. Of course, there won't be any awareness of what's going on if you're chilling with the whole like the same boys club, we like to call it, with the same boys club, with the people who, of course, don't want to change anything. And if you sit like, if you do like you do it like a collective, you have people who have a voice and want to do the same things. You can't just ignore them, and maybe that will help not just the industry, but like our way of living, because we're not the only line of work who is overworked or overseen.
Thank you.
Can I add
Yes,
something
of
to that? Just a concrete example or something in its own on the structural part of it. What I would like to do at some point with the Hospitality Worker Collective, this is a specific thing I'd like to sort of raise as a point of discussion, and it comes from being made aware by people I didn't know about somebody I do know. Well, not as a friend, but I visit this establishment and they work there. Mm-hmm. I was informed by these people who contacted me that they had, and it's a man, had sexually harassed and several women in this workplace, and been very homophobic. There was somebody who was a lesbian who worked there, and he was very boundary crossing, asking about their sex life and so forth. And I was given, that's just part of it. There was a disturbing amount of information about what he'd done. And so the question is, what do you do? Like, what do you do in a situation where you know someone? It can be close, intimately, or peripherally. What do you then do? What is our collective responsibility? Because I also asked them, how can I help? Because I'm not a watchdog, and I'm not a lawyer, and I don't have like a official anti-harassment organization necessarily. But I just very openly said to them, this is like a general question. What do we do here? Because it could be told to his now employer that he's done this, and let's say he got fired, but then we're sending the problem on. And that to me is also participating in a culture of silence, which we are trying to battle in the first place. So what do we do here? Because it's also a dual tragedy that we have men who do this. We know like the majority are men who treat women and gender minorities this way, but how do we together recognize, because it's massively taboo if we want to engage with people who aren't really confronted with this, also because they're probably afraid of being excluded and isolated. But we don't really have an island where we can ship all, and we shouldn't have an island to ship all these people. And that's a very open question that I would like to raise at some point with the Hospitality Worker Collective, and how, like, even for me, it's almost like difficult to find words, because how do we talk about that?
That is a very interesting question. As a journalist who also writes about abuse of power and abuse in both culture as well as food, but more in the culture industry, it's also very hard to talk about it because you often can't legally. And how do you rely on whisper networks? They can help, they can save someone from going somewhere where there are abusive structures, but maybe it doesn't reach many people. So that's a very interesting question that I would like to dwell on further. But maybe that's for a discussion or the lunch, a jolly topic for lunch. But you both chose organizing as a way to dismantle it, and open communication, which I agree with. But I saw on your Instagram, when I went into full stalker mode, that you also used humor, and you already alluded to it, making fun of a certain celebrity chef, for example. How can humor help us to maybe pick holes into power structures?
I think, I do it specifically in the form of memes. Memes is the best, it's changed my life. But the thing is, it's not a new practice. It's an old practice, in newspapers. You would have like small satirical strips. And what it does is kind of boil the larger structural problems down to one thing that is easily it transpires easily, right? Or at least I would hope so. I think it does. And it just feels so great not to take these people that seriously anymore. Like, they take themselves so seriously. And it's just, sometimes posting something has, had my heart racing, it's over the top. But it's so much fun, and it's like poking to their egos, which is a massive part of, this problem of celebrity chefs as well. And so I just think memes are fucking great.
And Kira, let's maybe as a final question before we go into questions and comments from the audience, what brings you joy in collective organizing?
As I said before, it was crazy, maybe also for our story, because one thing you have to know about us is we had our first meeting in March, and I was contacted by Fred, who's just opening a restaurant. That's why she's not here today with us. And I was like, okay, I've heard of her because like a mutual friend of mine talked about her, and she invited me to like the first meeting where this whole thing like formed, and it was crazy because I was sitting in a room with 10 people I've never met. And you're like, okay, wow, I had no idea. And that continued on. So we're 60 women or Flenter in our organization. And every time someone was coming in, I was like, oh my God, I had no idea there are so many people here. How is that happening? And that's like the fun thing about it, because you learn so much about the industry. You're like, I mean, I knew there were women, but wow. And sometimes they're wineries and you're like, oh, I like the wine. Oh, I'm making it. And I'm like, what? Never seen you anywhere, never heard of you. Why? And that's just amazing. And at our like roundtables, we started with like specific themes or talking points, and like after the second try, we're like, nah, it's just not worth it, because you have so many incredible people you meet, and there's so much passion in one room. Having them talk about one thing isn't helping, and there's so much love and so much joy from coming into a room, or you're just standing there and we do like a little introduction. You're standing there in front of like really cool people. You're like, I don't know how we started, but it's so great. And the fact that for the last couple of months there were so many like brands and so many people interested in this topic, that's what brings you joy, because you're connecting people, there are friendships evolving, there are people who like searched for a job, and you're able to direct them to a restaurant or a workplace where you know that they're going to be happy because it's an inclusive and nice environment. That just makes us happy. And the fact that actually, I mean, in Austria it's nice and the response is nice, but then you're hearing from people living in Berlin or all over Germany that's a nice thing, and that there's so much positive response in Germany, and we're like, okay, we just thought we're going to be like a little thing in Austria. It's just making us quite happy.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing about the joy in togetherness, which we are going to celebrate all day, but especially now, because now it's my favorite part of every talk, and I can rip my questions apart, because now I want to hear from you. So first of all, thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Lisa. For this very illuminating talk and so many questions that were brought up. As I said before, it's not possible to exhaustively talk about power structures, but maybe you can share your experiences, and we'll do this all again in the next coming years, because I think it's important to talk about it. So yeah, let's get into the conversations. Are there already questions? Great. First Anwert and then Sophia.
Okay,
I don't know your name, sorry, Sophia.
Vera. I'm Vera. So also from my side, that was fantastic. Well moderated and super cool insights. Thanks for that. And I wanted to, so I actually don't come from the hospitality industry, whereby I have been working in it. My first job was at Marché Mövenpick, which was really, really enlightening in the sense of how hard it is to work in, especially the bakeries, at least for me, work-wise. And later in the fine dining, when I came to Amsterdam, I went for my first job to a fine dining restaurant. And I totally resonate with what you said, and I want to add from my background, which is psychology, one thing. And before I do that, I want to thank the men who are in the room.
Yeah.
Really thank you, because without you, we're not going to change anything. We need to have allies also on the other side, because otherwise it's kind of, okay, this is a women topic, you know? So, and also thank you for staying here while we had a lot hearing that, or we heard a lot, that it's specifically a problem of white cis men. So whether you're cis or not, I don't care. Thank you that you're here. And I would like to add specifically to that point something and invite you. It's a German talk, but I think there's a YouTube translation, most probably. A talk by Gerard Hüther, who is a neuroscientist, who for me opened the eyes about where quite a few of the topics that where one of the factors might come from of quite a few of the topics that you just mentioned, and that it has to do something with hormones, and it has to do something with chromosomes. So the Y chromosome that men have and women don't is actually, it might have a tiny few more things written on it, but basically
Trans women may have.
Trans women might have. Okay. That I don't know. Therefore, I'm not a neuroscientist. But thanks for adding. There's actually two major information written on that, and that is number one, that in the womb of the mother, at one point, the direction of the development of the child goes into a different direction, and we have the male gonads and not the female further developed, and that this gets switched on again in puberty. And with that comes an enormous drive. Men just have, especially already before as children, but especially in their reproductive age, so much more energy available than women. That is why, however, it's genetically programmed. And with this...
Sorry, I don't want to, but I mean, it's nature and nurture. It's not as black and white as biology generally isn't.
And of course, it's just one factor. That absolutely, I'm with you. But I would like to for me, it was so interesting to understand also why they maybe, I want to add a maybe here, get quicker into decision-making positions. Because they just have more energy.
Sorry.
I mean, as I said, there is a debate about nature and nurture, and I can see where you're coming from, but there's also competing theories.
I just wanted to say, because I read him, and I just don't let's not ship it to I know the problematic things about biology. He said a lot of good things, but this is a point.
Okay.
He's very transphobic and very he's a very famous child educator actually, and he is from a very old school.
Yeah.
And I feel like you're saying an important thing, but it's problematic to phrase it in the way you did it. And also there's a lot of discussion about that.
Okay.
And it's just so hard because so many people are great in some things, but they forget about others. And I think we talk about structures, and structures are everywhere. And it's just just because you're very good in this one field doesn't mean that you have a million blind spots on another. And it doesn't mean that you participate in some power structures in a certain way. And just to say that in a sense of welcoming, to not take everything. And also you study psychology, so I feel like it's very important to really look at what you learn about biology in these fields and what you take for granted, and also with no offense, because I think there's a million things all of us read and we have to dismantle them because this is how structure works, right? It's not that as someone is giving us to us and saying this is the right information, this is the wrong one, right? We have to do all the fucking work to dismantle what is an information that is nurturing and what is an information that is bringing us into the direction where we vision a world that is different. And then also what is the shit we eat over and over and over and puke it out and give it to others and then say violent things. And it is hard. So it's not on you to dismantle it. I think it's for all of us to take each other and say, hey, let's talk about this topic in a nice way. Also saying these things in a full room is quite overwhelming anyway. And then if you have a lot of response that it's let's not bring you to this discussion. So if you want to talk about Gerard Hüther, let's do this later.
Okay.
Thank you for sharing that, may I? And I not meaning to silence you, not at all. Just maybe it would also go further away from the discussion, and I want to take the time also to invite as many voices as possible.
Can I add one last sentence to take it on? And
one sentence.
Yeah. So thank you for bringing that up. And I'm absolutely aware of nature and nurture. And this might be a way how to get men also in the conversation.
that would be another discussion entirely. But let's go there next time. Sophia, and then you want to say something, and someone else also? I think, yes. Sophia, and sorry, I don't know the rest of your names, but I'll try my best.
Okay, so I'm just gonna connect to the talk again, and I want to thank both of you, Kira and Lisa, because I think on one hand it's so important to build your own networks, and I've experienced that myself also in Berlin. There was something called the Feminist Food Club a few years ago, which was just a loose collective, and it's not so active anymore at the moment, but it was so important for me also to start my own restaurant, basically, to feel powerful enough and connected enough to be able to do that, and also what you've been doing, like publicly criticizing people, which I also do, and I recently did with a very famous German TV chef. And I was also scared to press the button, and what happened was I got so much positive feedback. I got people that opened up to me anonymously about things. I'm almost shaking talking about this. I will never be in his shows, you know, and he has a lot of influence, but I'm glad I did it, and I think these two tools are so important to change the system, to be able to speak up, and maybe for the people who have more privilege to speak up, to be the first ones to do so. Men also. And because you talked about solutions. And just one thing I wanted to add, because it came up in a talk I heard from a journalist in 2019 at a food conference, because you talked about how, why are there so many people taking part in these power systems, even if they are not in power or in charge. This weird idea of hospitality in itself, to feel like, he called it like a pirate system, where that you are the wildest, you will keep cooking when your hand falls off, you will go there when you're sick, you know, this like weird outlaw society of men, you know, that pride themselves with like doing the shittiest
having a
things.
burnout,
while they sometimes kill themselves while working. And I think the only thing we can do is like we can show that hospitality can also work differently in work conditions, and maybe that can set an example too for people to also find out that this is not the only way to work in this industry. And and so I just want to say I think change is possible, and thank you so much for doing what you're doing.
Thank you. You and a beautiful fuzzy top.
Thanks so much, and I really admire that you are going to take things into your own hands. That's really great. For me, I also try to read the room a little bit, and also seeing where we at and with what kind of message we all came here, and I feel like we're trying to distinguish a lot of fires that are happening in our world at the moment. But I wanted to say that a lot of diversity, if you have diversity in places, that helps to distinguish more fires at once. That's just proof. And I want to point out the room, which I don't know who is in power positions, but people are here. I don't want to assume, but at the same time, the people who are not here, which is also very telling. And I find that always a bit disappointing, that at a place where it is advocated to be differently thinking, that the people who are leading positions, who are make this happen, are not here. And given that I do believe that this is a very important issue, and that diversity will help solve other problems, I wish that there would be an invitation, an active one, actually, maybe for the next meetings, so that we have people that also hear it, what we're talking about.
Can you be more specific?
Sorry?
Can you be more specific?
Sure. Your names? Or?
I assume restaurant owners.
Just an elaboration on the vision of who, because I'm not.
Yeah.
I
guess I have people I know who are in leading positions, that are owning restaurants, that are having maybe the money to do it, or taking certain, like also who spoke at the beginning today. There was no woman, there was a hostess, which is great, but just like the little messages. And I know I'm very like nitty bitty in it, but even at these events, I expect more. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know a lot of faces here. I have a few of the people I know from Copenhagen, Denmark. So I don't really know people's positions, and of course it's also gendered. But in terms of who's an employer or a restaurateur, so thank you for answering.
And thank you for sharing. It's a very important comment, and I would like to maybe an experience I've had a few years ago when I did similar talk about the music industry, on which I write a lot as well. I specifically invited someone who at that point used to be in a position of high power, and it was so great because he openly admitted his mistakes and what he learned from them. Yes. So that is maybe something for the future. Sometimes people can learn, and asking them to talk about that is also sometimes very illuminating. But you had another question, and maybe it's the last one.
15 minutes.
15 minutes, so great. All of you, unfortunately, be quick, then we can get all of you on stage as well.
Yeah, it relates a little bit to the conversation we are having now. Thank you for your talk and your work. I'm Ilse, I'm part of the Dutch food movement, and what I was thinking when you asked about why focus on upper class gastronomy, let's call it like that, and the celebrity chefs, I think what is really important is that a lot of times they are also spokesperson for the food movement in general. At least I see that in Denmark with MAD and the foundation and all the projects around it. So it's and in the movement there are people from the whole food chain involved. So in the Netherlands and here in Germany, I guess as well. But I can speak for the Netherlands. Then I have had leading positions in that movement. As one of the boys, actually. I work with a few guys who are really like the celebrity chefs, and are also now, years later, really discussions about how they work and what is going on there. And there's a paradox in there, because they're at the same time also spokespersons for breaking these power constructions in terms of the food chain, or a farmer, I was just thinking, I wanted to ask you actually, what do you see, because you mentioned it a little bit, how do you see that paradox, because those celebrity chefs also stand for an ideal, that's why you attack them. Because that's why I find it sometimes difficult. At our last symposium was similar like this. We had a talk about this and invited people from all over the world who are talking about this, but we are also organizing it with people who should be in the room. So there's this tension, and the fact that I have to organize it and not them is also okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. You want to answer? Oh, you may clap. You want to answer immediately? Just keep in mind that there are
yes. I recognize what you mentioned, what you're pinpointing. Absolutely, and it's a very typical thing, because we see not only employers, a singular head chef who's a celebrity, taking all of the credit and being the only face. So appropriating other people's value, appropriating other people's work for their own fame.
Yeah.
And they also do that, they also appropriate the criticism that's happening. For instance, you mentioned MAD, which is a Danish symposium that has a very sort of international focus. And to me, what I see, it's founded by René Redzepi, and in a way, it's so clever, because he owns both the way that workplaces are conducted, where it's been proved that they have applied very, very poor, harmful people practices. And then he also owns the criticism of that. So that's putting it out in very general terms. And then also, just as another example, recently last year, they came out as a disclaimer before a critical article about them that he suddenly realized that the construction of fine dining wasn't financially saying it had nothing to do with all the criticism going on. So again, like presenting himself as somebody who's had a vision and all by himself. So I recognize that, and that should also be spoken about, and the media are enabling it as well. So, I mean, I don't know if that answered your question.
But that's also maybe to keep the discussion going at lunch. I saw you had a question, and then the two of you here.
Just a question. How would you add people that are not hospitality like workers, but that are consumer to this organizational equation?
How would you add them?
Yeah, like just like restaurant guests, some people that are not from the industry, but they have a big economic impact, and that they still consume restaurant and food supplies to these organizations to do their change, no? Because we need to communicate, but like sometimes the only way of communicating is not through these organizations. How do you see we can add all this?
That's a good question.
I think that we actually have the possibility to talk to a lot of people, as you said, our guests, and you can like join them in and talk about it. And I think if you do that again in a positive way of criticism, and you're like, no, everything's bad, but you know that's wrong. Don't want to change that. I think you can meet the right people, and I think we all had guests, or we all got to know people at events who know people and know people. And I think it's important that you keep up those connections and work your way kind of through it, because that's what actually hospitality is about for me as well, connections. And you can involve them into the discussion. And if you do events and in Austria it's rather easy because there's not too many people in Ross Way, and if you get the right people to be on your side and openly speak about it, I think that you can get more and more people into. I mean, we're talking about spokespeople here again, but that's actually, for most people, that helps a lot, and that's like kind of getting their interest into the topic. I think that works best.
Can I add something? Because what I realize is that they have this work shortage as well, that nobody wants to work. So many thousands of people are leaving hospitality work per year. And I think it's a little bit funny that 5 women working in restaurants in Vienna have to start a conversation about it, making the gastronomy or media or guests aware of what is going on. As well, what you all said, that this is kind of a, how would you say it?
Cleaning up the mess?
Yes, I do have to do it, and I'm happy to do it. I wanted to do it for a long time, but I had to take about 10 years working in gastronomy that we found each other, that we had the power to speak up. And it's super intense and super sad sometimes, and that nobody of the glorious chefs will do that because there's the work shortage. Everybody's hotel has to close in West Austria. There's a huge tourism in Tyrol and stuff, but nobody is doing something. Nobody asks the people why you're leaving, what is wrong with this, why would we have to do it, and why we're not getting all the support we can from all the people that are glorified as well from the media and food journalists in Austria. And this is really sad. I'm so happy that we're here and we can speak openly, and I think it's important that we unionize our countries and borders. This is what I have to say.
Thank you.
And you don't have to do it in a humorous way. It's just we have to do it in that way because other ways we're this loud and we do it in this way because we have to, because nobody's listening if we're hard and loud, and that's what I want to say.
There's so much to talk about, but we heard the bell, so just real quick.
Also, there's no pressure because it's only lunch afterwards. So if you have really important question and you want to keep talking, you can do that for
but I'm hungry and I want to go to the loo, so I'll take the two of you, and then we'll just break up into smaller groups and continue the conversation.
Can I just say 10 words as well? Acknowledging that dining out is a luxury. Wherever it is, it's somebody who's serving you. And second of all, if you're being served many dishes with very intricate things you can obviously see it's taken a lot of hours, scrutinize why the price is what it is. It should represent the work that's put into that. So I think that's
This is so perfect for me to take it, and you gave me just a perfect introduction, because I think also like what I was thinking is, we speak so much about like the devaluation of production also in the structure, and I feel like it's even like it's in all the restaurants, it's seen, yes, there's a million power structures we have, like, but this is also one where I think it's so important to think of that like in the abstract world of like, if you see the top right, so we have the visioning and then you have the production and like of course like the care work, and you look in a restaurant and then there is the same, right? There's the productions and it's not paid well and it's not valued and no one wants to fucking do it, and we just want to do it for a year and then we just like, but please let me do the visioning, let me do the creation, because this is what like, this is what we all should do, and this is also what is paid well. Everything else is not paid well. And I think like adding that as a question is like, how can we change the devaluation of production also within these systems as another like dimension of power, and also like where I feel like it is also unlearning patriarchy, right? Because then in the way, that kind of way of how we learn that creation and administration and building structures, this is the thing that is valuable, but like what is not valuable is the fucking hard groundwork that is done like every day by so many people. And this is also something we can do in the systems we work in and speak about it with each other. And that was something where I felt like, I think this is it's an important topic.
Thank you so much. There was also a great final word. So I would say there's still so much to talk about, and what is the better venue to talk and chat and get into the nitty-gritty than a wonderful lunch. Thank you all. Big clap for yourselves to join this session, and to our wonderful panelists, Lisa and Kira.